Hi, everyone, and welcome. I'm Veronica Vargas Stidvent, Executive Director of the Center for Women in Law, and welcome to today's installment of the Susan Blount Power Lunch Series, a conversation with Sara Moss and Judge Nancy Atlas. Our Power Lunch series showcases the career paths of prominent lawyers and public figures in a casual environment. Today's event has been approved for 1 hour of CLE ethics credit by the Texas State Bar. If you are watching us online via Zoom, you will receive an email later this week, most likely Friday, with information on claiming your credit. If you happen to be calling in and joining us by phone, please let us know that you attended today by sending an email to Center for Women in Law, that's all one word, at law.utexas.edu. And if you're joining us in the audience, we can give you your claim credit afterwards. We will save some time at the end of today's program for Q&A. So if you're joining us live, we'll have some microphones for you. And if you are online, please drop your questions into the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. We're very excited today, a little bit about the Center. The Center for Women in Law is a national resource and champion for women lawyers, generating lasting change within the legal profession. And we do that in a variety of ways through our programs and initiatives, including events like today's Power Lunch, which is sponsored by the Hortense Ward Speakers Fund. We're very grateful for that support and for the support of so many of you here and joining us virtually. Every gift makes a huge difference to the center and our mission, and we appreciate your generosity. So today, let's go ahead and meet our guests for today's Power Lunch. Sara Moss is a Fortune 500 business executive, trailblazing female litigator, and change agent who is passionate about developing women's leadership skills. As vice chair of the Estée Lauder Companies, Sara provided guidance to the company's executive management, board of directors, and the Lauder family on issues critical to the business's success. Before becoming vice chair, she was executive vice president and general counsel of Estée Lauder, where she was responsible for the company's global legal function. She has been a steadfast voice for women's advancement throughout her career. In 2019, she partnered closely with Estée Lauder senior leaders to drive the company's first women's advancement and gender equality strategy. The following year, she deepened her commitment to championing professional women by creating the Open Doors Women's Leadership Program, which has continued to be a proven success. Open Doors delivers life-changing lessons in effective leadership. Combining experiential learning and coaching, this intensive program helps participants develop and hone essential leadership skills to carry with them for life. The framework for this innovative women's development program took shape in 2017 when Sara collaborated with NYU Law School leaders to create the Sara Moss Women's Leadership Program. Every year since, this intensive 5-day course has supported selected first-year law students to develop critical skills, creating community, and building confidence and courage. Sara is a graduate of the University of Massachusetts, Phi Beta Kappa, and NYU Law School. She was a law clerk for the Honorable Constance Baker Motley, U.S. District Court Judge in the Southern District of New York. She was a litigator at Davis Polk Wardwell and then served as one of the first small group of female prosecutors as an assistant U.S. attorney in the Southern District of New York. She later became a senior litigation partner at Howard, Darby & Levin, which is now Cummington & Burling, and then senior vice president at Pitney Bowes, Inc. Sara serves on the board of trustees of NYU Law School and on the advisory board of the International Rescue Committee and the Legal Aid Society. She's been recognized with many, many awards and honors. I won't list them all here, but they include the New York Law Journal Lifetime Achievement Award, the NYU Outstanding Alumni Award, and the Now Legal Defense and Education Fund Aiming High Award. She has 4 adult children and lives in New York with her husband, Michael Gould. We are also very honored to be joined today in conversation with the Honorable Nancy Friedman Atlas, who served as U.S. District Judge from 1995 to 2022, after an accomplished 21-year legal career in commercial litigation and alternative dispute resolution. During her 27-year judicial career on the Houston, Texas federal bench, Judge Atlas presided over thousands of civil and criminal cases. Houston Bar Association members consistently gave her among the highest ratings of all the judges in the Southern District of Texas, reflecting that she issued thoughtful and timely rulings while demonstrating respect and a patient demeanor with counsel and parties. Before her judicial service, Judge Atlas had an active business litigation practice at a commercial law firm and as an assistant U.S. attorney civil division in New York City, and then at a commercial law firm in Houston. She pioneered the practice of mediation in commercial cases in Houston starting in 1990 and mediated almost 500 cases between 1990 and 1995 before her judicial appointment. Prior to her appointment, Judge Atlas was instrumental in designing the ADR program for the U.S. District Courts for the Southern District of Texas. After resigning from the bench, Judge Atlas founded Atlas ADR PLLC, through which she is available to provide services as a mediator, arbitrator, special master, and e-discovery neutral, preside over mock trials and moot court sessions, consult on litigation and settlement strategy, and conduct neutral case evaluations. She's handled matters involving a wide variety of commercial, intellectual property, technology, insurance, bankruptcy, and construction subjects. She is also a member of the Federal Arbitration Inc.'s panel of distinguished neutrals and has been approved as an arbitrator in an arbitration administered by the American Arbitration Association and is part of its complex commercial cases program. She is engaged in a wide range of services to the bar, the judiciary, the public, and other causes, including the Center for Women in Law, and she has been recognized for her efforts by many organizations and has been a frequent speaker over 30 years on numerous litigation, ADR, and substantive topics. We are so honored to be joined by both Sara and Judge Atlas. In addition to all of their many accomplishments and legal career highlights that I mentioned here, they're also very good friends. And so this is going to prove to be a very interesting and lively conversation, I have no doubt. So please join me in welcoming Sara Moss and Judge Nancy Atlas.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon, Sara. I am the local, so I've taken on the burden, if you will, of being the moderator, although Sara we may fight over that role a little. My first question to you is, what are the salient recollections you have of law school and your whole experience?
I think I can't describe law school in one word or even a few words. I think there was agony and there was some ecstasy. In the beginning, mostly agony, as you know. We met in 1971, so we go back a long way. Law school was daunting to me. I had done well in college, but I was a teacher for 3 years before I went to law school. So I came in and I didn't know what law school was going to be like. As you remember, there were a lot of men who sucked up a lot of air in the room. I remember my first cold call, which I flubbed completely. I remember the case. This was 53 years ago. I remember the case. I remember what I said. I remember how stupid I felt. And pretty much I didn't talk again for quite some time in law school. So I found my way, though, eventually. I went to law school because I was passionate about women's rights, and I wanted to save the world. You see what a great job, how that has worked out. But that was my passion. And so I took courses after first year that fueled that passion for justice, for women's rights, a legal aid course. And so law school got better. I wrote a law review article on the Equal Rights Amendment, which you also notice still has not passed. So, but that was my passion. I think law school was a mixed experience, but the ecstasy for me in law school were our friends. We're meeting a group of women who were smart, who were gritty, who worked hard, and we found each other. NYU was a quarter of the class was women, which is why I went to NYU rather than Columbia or another law school.
And for context, the rest of the top 10 or even top 20 law schools had 5% or fewer back in 1971.
Exactly.
And it was a huge
It felt very different. It felt very different, those other schools. So, but still 25% was not that much. But we found each other, and we supported each other, and we had fun together. We had consciousness-raising groups, if you remember. And we all ended up doing quite well. And many of us at the top of our class. So I think finding my posse, my people, you, and friends who have been friends now for over 50 years, made the law school a wonderful experience. Yeah. What about you?
Well, I was a math major in college and declared belatedly a political science major because I had hit my pinnacle of understanding in math. I literally could not comprehend imaginary numbers in calculus context. So I declared a poli-sci major. I'd want to be a doctor. My father, who was a very extraordinary physician, said no normal women are doctors. And so I said, oh okay. And he said, go work for IBM, because I was a math major, and back then you actually programmed, and the code came out in cards with holes punched in it. But after a while of Fortran and COBOL, I decided, no. So hence the political science major. Had a summer job, which gave me the opportunity to work with a few lawyers. I was literally the complaint bureau, box 13 for the city of New York. And when I had to decide as a first cut if something was malfeasance, like criminal or intentional wrong, or misfeasance, a mistake, I had to go to see lawyers who worked in that department. So I figured out I could do what they're doing. And they said, go to law school. So lo and behold, I did. And NYU, Sarah didn't mention this, but NYU recruited us. We all got in. The women who went to NYU were highly, highly capable, did really well on law boards, and frankly had good resumes. But we all got into a bunch of Ivy League type law schools. NYU reached out one-on-one and recruited us. This 25% at that year was not an accident.
I had never been recruited for anything in my whole life. So when I got the card and the recruiting, I thought, wow, this is great.
Yeah, and so I got to law school as primarily a math major, and it was hard. Law school the first year, all the 3 years, was hard. I was pretty good at, not bad at arithmetic, but pretty good at math theory. But writing complicated essays and complicated narratives was not what I was really used to. So I felt quite insecure. I worked constantly. But the way I figured out my way out of this funk, I did, frankly, do very well the first semester because I did nothing but work on the law school business. But I was driving myself crazy, so I applied through these same lawyers to the U.S. Attorney's Office, and I had a part-time job there because some of these Department of Investigation lawyers had gone to the U.S. Attorney's Office. And frankly, having the variety of some work and some seeing law in practice gave me the beginnings of some confidence. And frankly, I agree with Sarah. I won't repeat about our friendships, but I will say my law school career was life-changing. It gave me a sense that it wasn't just about what you memorized or how you could apply in an exam. Frankly, I'm a pretty good exam taker. But the fact is, it began to teach me the multiplicity of skills that one can use in the law that are valued. It's not just about, quote, knowing an answer.
Yeah, I remember, Nancy, I remember first semester, after first semester exams, before we got our grades, I had no idea how I had done. If I had gotten A's or F's, I really didn't. It was the first time, you had to spot an issue and analyze an issue. I had figured out how to do really well in college. I knew how to do that. I knew how to write an essay. I knew how to answer a question. But law school, I mean, who knew? And I remember that insecurity. And when I did well, first of all, I remember a man. In those days, you had your names and your grades were posted. So much for anonymity. But I remember one of the guys in law school, and I was not the top of the class. I did well. Attacked me, saying, you're taking the place of a man. And he didn't do that well. So I think that's why he did it. But I remember that complete insecurity and feeling of uncertainty. And as we went on, it grew, and that confidence grew. And that was life-changing for me.
And I have to say, the men really did wonder why we were there taking a spot.
Yes, yes.
I also will say that I'm very tied to my own law school because it gave me the launching pad for a career I never could have imagined.
And this year, at our 50th reunion, Judge Atlas is getting the award for Distinguished Alumna. So your law school is devoted to you as well.
All right, moving on. I would like to ask you in a more generic sense. Sarah and I worked together. We both clerked in the federal courthouse. I clerked for, obviously, a different judge from Sarah. And then we both went to law firms. And then we both went to the United States Attorney's Office. Sarah in the criminal division. I didn't want to put people behind bars.
I did.
Which is laughable given my later job. But the point is that we had similar paths.
Yes, yeah.
And then Sarah went and went to a very new firm, which she frankly built in a meaningful sense. And I went to Houston and went to a law firm, and then we'll tell you more later. But the point is, what do you think, given all of your jobs, including eventually becoming General Counsel of Pitney Bowes, a technical organization, and then Estée Lauder, what do you think are the keys to your success? A nice, easy question. That's a softball.
I think there are a few keys. I think the first is hard work. I just worked incredibly hard wherever I went. I think about that. I have 4 children, and a daughter and 3 sons. And somebody once asked my daughter, who was probably, I don't know, 8 or 9, if she wanted to be a lawyer. And she said, absolutely not, because it's like having homework for the rest of your life. And that was true. So from the beginning, I worked incredibly hard. I was just mentioning to somebody, while I was at Davis Polk, I could never get my clothes cleaned because when I left for work, the cleaner wasn't open, and when I came home, the cleaner was closed. So I had to figure out on a Saturday before I went to the office how I was going to do that. So I think hard work and really grit. Grit, you know, we talk about grit. I think grit is a combination of passion and perseverance. And I was passionate about what I was doing. I don't think you can work that hard for this long if you don't have passion. So I think the grit and hard work. I think resilience, because I certainly had failures in my life, personally and professionally. And I think getting back up is a big part of it. Everybody here is too young, but there was a Broadway show called The Unsinkable Molly Brown. And it was a woman who got thrown overboard in the Titanic, but she didn't drown. And she just hung on to the life raft, and she got back up, and then she went to New York and whatever. I think one of the biggest compliments I've ever gotten in my life was a colleague at Estée Lauder who called me the unsinkable Sara Moss. So I really love that, because that's grit, I think, and resilience, you know, getting back up. I am relentlessly optimistic. I am. And I hope I'm not naive, but I really believe, it goes back to the hard work. If you work hard enough and you really do it, you can make it happen. You can win. That's true for the law and in many parts of life. So I think that relentless optimism is a big part of it too. And it's fun. All of this is fun for me. And I think fun is really important too. So I think that combination.
All
What
right.
about you? You're pretty successful. You've been successful, so what are your keys?
Sarah and I obviously have talked about this about 100,000 times in the last 53 years. But I'm going to add to all of things Sarah said, because I also am a glass half full kind of person. But it's about what Sarah talked about hard work and optimism. But to me, more, when I say substantively, in terms of characteristics, I believe that my success was partly due to an ability to listen actively to people who are talking to me about problems, or even in a cocktail conversation, looking them in the eye and listening and figuring out what is motivating them without a whole lot of judgment. I'm talking at the beginning of a conversation. Active listening and then evaluating their interests. as a lawyer and a mediator, frankly, it's really helpful to put yourself in the other person's shoes and then figure out what's bothering them, what they think their problems are, and then being able to come up with new ideas, because what I'm hearing about problems, they're not my problems. I have the advantage of objectivity. So having the ability to be a problem solver was a big deal. I really believe that that was a core of my success in multi-party litigation, where big securities cases or others where, you had 10 lawyers in a room and trying to move the ball forward at some point. And I was a woman. I mean, I was often the only woman in the room. We're talking in the 80s now. But that role as being a person to problem solve actually wound up leading me to mediation, which is a separate discussion. But that role of mediation wound up leading me to other a statewide appointment in Texas, a governor's gubernatorial appointment. And the people that I met along the way who felt like I cared about them and was constructive in solving problems, those people helped me later in my career. They were the ones that wanted to recommend me. I give much of the benefit, much of the basis for my judgeship to those experiences. The other is keeping my commitments. I am notoriously late, but I am not really late. I'm 5 to 10 minutes late. And Scott, in my investiture, the public investiture with 600 people in the room, we know a lot of people, gave a little talk about the importance of judging and the robe and whatnot. And he said that I was going to have to give up, make one big change in my life, and that was I was going to have to give up Nancy time, because Nancy time meant I was always 5 to 10 minutes late. As it turned out, other judges said, no, court can't start without you. But P.S., I did really work for 27 years on keeping my commitments, including being on time. But the commitment thing is a much deeper conversation. People that succeed volunteer for positions or assignments, and they meet the commitments they make. If you disappoint someone who's expecting product from you, and I don't care what the context is, if you disappoint, that goes as sort of a negative on your scorecard with the other side, the other person. And if you're going to be late, don't just pretend no one's going to notice, because they do notice, and it is important if you're going to have to change the commitment or whatever.
Just don't be late.
Give notice. And try not to be late. Yeah. I mean, I get that. Scott, my husband, by the way, is right about that.
Can I say a couple of points to those points, Nancy?
No, I'm sorry.
Yes. Well, you're not the judge anymore. I mean, right,
don't judge me.
It's a conversation. But those, all your points are important. But the one about listening, and certainly that's important as a judge, and your reputation as a judge was so outstanding. But it's really important as a lawyer. And I think about when I became general counsel, a lot of lawyers came and tried to pitch business to me. And I listened, I knew them, and I wanted to be polite. And all of them were telling me how great they were. They were not listening to what I needed in my business, or they didn't understand my business, first of all. They didn't pay enough attention, or they didn't take the trouble to understand my business. But when I talked to them, they weren't really listening. They were trying to tell me how great they were, and it just didn't work. So I think this point about listening is important from the very beginning. And certainly if you're going to a law firm or public interest, wherever you're going to go, understanding. Judge Atlas said, putting yourself in the other person's shoes. Yes, you have to do that. It's not about how great you are, how smart you are. It is about solving the problem. And you can't solve the problem if you don't understand the problem. The other thing that you said that's been critical in my life, and I've told my children for years, is what goes around comes around. And again, Judge Atlas talked about the people who she worked with or who she did a great job for, who then turned around and recommended her for her judgeship. That's true in life. And I have many, many examples in my own life of things that I've done well or where I've helped people and it comes around to help you, as it should. This is part of your reputation. And when you don't do it, that comes back as well. So what goes around comes around is, I think, very important. And particularly in the law, it's a small community. Even in Houston, even in New York City, it's a small community, and you build your reputation. Again, when Judge Atlas says about you meet your commitments, you get known for meeting your commitments. You know, you basically pull the rug out from under me. That's one chance you get to do that.
Right,
You know?
right.
And that becomes your reputation. So it's really important to remember.
Yeah, when I started the judgeship, the chief judge of the Southern District of Texas, who was a grandfatherly type and also a fabulous judge, he said to me, Nancy, you're working so hard and so far so good, but you need to remember, give reasons for the decisions you make and either write them down or put them on the record so that the parties and the Court of Appeals or the Supreme Court knows why you did what you did, and they can then appreciate your line of reasoning and give you the benefit of the doubt. And that advice was so important. It was the single most important thing that I learned as a judge, to give reasons. Let's change gears. Risks you've taken, Sarah. Did the risks pay off? Did they backfire? Tell me about risks and whether you would recommend it to others.
They generally did. The risks generally did pay off, and I would recommend it to others. I think women especially don't take risks. I think because I didn't have a career plan, it was easier for me to take risks. So for example, I was an associate at Davis Polk, a great firm. I was doing well. I wanted to go to the U.S. Attorney's Office. The senior partner sat me down and said, you've got a great future here, but if you go, you can never come back. Well, this was one of the best firms in New York, and I had a good future there. This was a huge risk to go and do something that I wanted to do, but I didn't know where it would lead, and I didn't know if I'd be good at it, and it was very hard. So I took that leap, and it was probably the best decision I ever made.
Is that the same person that mentioned something about your demeanor? You should tell that.
No, that's a sort of a different category, but can I tell that story later?
Yes, you may.
We know each other very well. Another risk, for example, I left the U.S. Attorney's Office because I was pregnant with my first child. And as Judge Atlas will tell you, that's a 24/7 job. So I went back to Davis Polk.
Mothering is too, but she's talking about the U.S. Attorney's Office.
Yes, exactly. So 24/7 was not going to work. But after Davis Polk said you can never come back, when I was ready to leave the U.S. Attorney's Office, they said, please come back. And, but I wanted to work part-time when I had 2 small children, and I did. And they created a part-time program for me, which was great. A group of men I knew were starting a law firm. And again, you're too young, but there were these old Mickey Rooney, Judy Garland, old movies that said, hey kids, let's put on a show. This was really, hey kids, let's start a law firm. It really was. But they were really smart. They had a lot of energy. They asked me to come in as a partner. Again, I had I think a great future at Davis Polk. That's why they brought me back. And at that point, I had tried a lot of cases. But it really wasn't that much fun. And these guys were excited. And they were excited about bringing me in as part of the practice. So I did it. And as I've said, I was earning less as a partner at this new firm than I was working part-time at Davis Polk. So it was a huge risk. You know, I had 4 children, and my income was important to the family, but I took that leap. And, you know, it took a while to build the firm, but we did, and it was spectacular and very, very successful. So I would say, and going to Pitney Bowes, leaving practice, I had built quite a good practice at the firm, and I was offered a job as general counsel, At that point, there were, I was the 11th woman general counsel of a public company in the United States. So there weren't very many.
This was what year?
This was 1980, no, 1996, 1996, yeah. And I didn't know really how to do that job, but I figured I had the tools and I would go for it. And my mantra to myself really was, what's the worst that can happen? Obviously, I was going to give it my best and do a great job if I could, but if it didn't work out, I could probably go back to a law firm. So again, taking risks that are not crazy, but stretched and were not completely in my comfort zone has made my career not just rewarding, but fun. And I come back to that because I think you work so hard, spend so much time, you want it to be energizing and fun.
Did you know you were going to be a general counsel before you actually were invited to do so?
No.
And how did you make the switch from Pitney Bowes to Estée Lauder? Pitney Bowes, by the way, was a company, correct me if I'm wrong, was a company that had stamp machines. So, I mean, it was technical, businessy, blah, blah. And Estée Lauder has a huge business component, but is in a different industry.
Right. And Pitney Bowes are more than stamp machines. I'll tell you about that. So, and this is also what goes around comes around, and building a network. So I was a senior litigation partner in the firm, trying cases. In fact, my last trial was in front of Sonia Sotomayor. Her last trial as a district judge. It settled at the very end because she beat us up, but that's another story. Anyway, and I got a call about being general counsel of Pitney Bowes, which not only makes stamp machines, but a lot of technology, a lot of back office equipment, high-tech equipment, more than just stamp machines, but that is the company. And the call came from a woman who was a headhunter who was the mother of one of my daughter's classmates at school. And I said, why me? You know, this doesn't make any sense. Turns out that the new CEO had been general counsel, and he wanted a general counsel who was prepared to take risks. He wanted to sue the Postal Service, which was going to be a problem. And he felt that was really important. They were basically sort of taking a whole stream of income from the company. And he wanted a litigator. He wanted somebody who would take risks and not be afraid. I met him. I went up because I thought it was business development for my law firm, and I would just meet him. But we hit it off. We understood each other. We both moved kind of fast, and it was a great energy. So no, I didn't have background. Though at Davis Polk, you had to do corporate work and litigation and have a pretty strong general background. But I didn't know about patents. I didn't know about copyrights. I knew about the board, but not really governance in that way. I was a litigator, and a commercial litigator and a white-collar litigator. But I learned quickly. And as I've said, you know, I figured I could pick up the phone and somebody would answer it and give me some help. So I just took that plunge, and it was great. Estée Lauder, so after 5 years, I was really ready to move on. And I just didn't know what I wanted to do. I figured that would be sort of my last chapter. And I looked at a lot of possibilities. I looked at public interest. I had an offer to be an anchor on Court TV, but I didn't think that was a brilliant career move, so I didn't do that. And then Estée Lauder came. Being general counsel of a publicly traded company has a lot of similarities, no matter what the business is. Estée Lauder, we have more claims work. We have, you know, it is a much more global business and much more glamorous, I will say that. But some of the components are very much the same. So I knew how to do that job, basically, as general counsel.
Do you want to comment about how you were much more than general counsel for Estée Lauder? You actually became a confidant of the leaders. And that was an added skill and sensitivity that I think often happens in corporations, especially ones that are fairly closely held, at least when you started. And Do you want to
Yeah,
comment a
well,
little bit on that? Because you still have
sure.
a relationship with them.
Well, yes, very much. Estée Lauder is a publicly traded family-controlled company. So the Lauder family, there are two classes of stock, and the Lauder family controls the voting in the stock, but it's widely publicly held. I think the word is not confidant as much as trust. And I think every good general counsel needs to have the trust of the senior management, of their team, and of the board, and in my case, and also of the family, the Lauder family. And so I worked and continue actually to work closely with the board and the family and the senior management. And I think you do that by being trustworthy, which is, telling the truth, speaking truth to power, which is not always easy, and by just playing it straight, giving your best judgment, giving feedback, but giving it in the way that can be taken, often in private, but having a very clear sense of right and wrong. This is a company where everybody wants to do the right thing, and I think most companies that's true. So, but sometimes the general counsel has to be the moral compass because there are a lot of conflicting and competing pulls and tugs. So I think over the years, earning the trust of all the different factors and segments of the company was critical to not only my success, but to a broader responsibility. So I wasn't just dealing with legal issues or business issues, because there are family issues intertwined as well. And I think being a voice of reason and, again, a compass is important.
Do you think that you suffered any failures that impacted you, from which you learned, or
In my
otherwise?
life?
Not in your life. We're going to go with just professional at this time.
Okay. There are many on both sides. Oh, absolutely. Oh,
You
yeah.
want to comment how you bounced back or whatever?
Well, I think it goes back to resilience. So, as I said, I went to law school to be an advocate for women's rights. And the job that I passionately want, and I took courses that supported that. I've told Judge Atlas, when I interviewed at Davis Polk, one of the corporate partners looked at my resume and said, "I see you've taken 3 years of banana and the law." Those were his exact words, because I took women in the law, children in the law, school in the law, and I was fine with that, because that's what I wanted to do. But it all worked out. So I wanted a job with a young woman lawyer who was teaching at Rutgers Law School and had just started the Women's Rights Project at the ACLU, named Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And that was my dream. She had just started, and I just wanted to work with her. I wanted to work at the ACLU. The Women's Rights Project was my dream. I didn't get that job. She said she didn't have the money and whatever, but just face it, I didn't get the job. I met her many years later, and she said, "Oh, yes, I remember." She didn't remember, but she was very gracious about it. But that was a blow. That's what I went to law school for. That's what I was working for. But I regrouped and said, okay, what am I going to do? So I had not worked at a law firm either summer in law school. Coincidentally, met someone who was an associate at Davis Polk. Said, "You think they might need other lawyers?" He said, "I don't know." I'd sent him my resume, and I was offered a job. And my thinking was, this is one of the top firms in New York. I'm going to learn a lot here, so that when I go up against a firm like this, I will know what the big guys are doing. And that's really exactly my thinking. I thought I would do it for 2, maybe 3 years, so I'd really learn how to do it well. And these firms really do practice law, I think, in the highest degree and highest way. But that was my plan, so that I pivoted. I couldn't get the job I wanted, but I was going to lay the foundation for a career that I wanted. And of course, the zigs and zags came. The other thing is that when I was at Davis Polk, I volunteered for pro bono cases. Judge Atlas talked about sort of doing more. So I knew I wanted to do that kind of work. So I worked on a big Title VII case discrimination case that ended up going to the Supreme Court. I was gone by then. And I volunteered to do pro bono cases with somebody who became the United States attorney. So I was doing the security cases during the day and the accounting cases and, you know, the bread and butter of the firm kind of during the day. And then at night I was doing these pro bono cases, which is why I could never get my clothes cleaned because I was always at the office.
Tell the audience what sleep hours you endured for
Not
like 30 years.
not so much. I like to get up early. So, and I also had a social life. When I was at Davis Polk, I was not married, and you know, I had friends. I had a social life. So I didn't sleep that much. I sleep that much. I like to get up early, and then of course, having 4 children, I had to get up early. So 30 years, I think 50 years, I didn't sleep that much. But again,
Wait a minute, wait. She's not telling you. I don't know when she'd go to sleep at night, but I do know that Sara Moss regularly got up at 4 a.m. to do the following: to work for 2 hours, get the kids' breakfast ready. She did have help, by the way, but the help didn't get started until like 6 or 7 in the morning. And then Sara, somehow would get these kids to school, and she negotiated. Can I tell about the reverse commute?
oh,
To
sure.
Pitney Bowes.
Yeah.
So one of the things that Sara noticed was she needed to have a way to get her children to school. So part of her package at Pitney Bowes was a driver and a car to take her from Manhattan out to Connecticut or wherever it was, because she was doing a reverse commute. And it happened that this car also dropped her children off at one or more schools on the way. That's optimization. All right, we're going to switch
Well,
gears.
can I just say one thing there, too? Because I think women, and I'm speaking for myself, certainly early in my career, don't appreciate their value. And I think as I went on in my career, I got a better appreciation of my value. So let's just talk about that for a second. Pitney Bowes is in Stamford, Connecticut. I lived in New York City with my children, with my family. And as I said, I went up there thinking I'd just meet the CEO and it would be business development. But we really clicked. We liked each other, and there was good energy. He wanted me to take this job. I was concerned, not about getting the kids to school. We just threw that in. But I would have an hour commute or a 45-minute commute, and that would make my life really different. I have 4 children at different schools in New York. When I worked in the city, I could run to a doctor's appointment, I could run to a school play, and that made it workable. This was going to be harder for me. And so I said, not because I'm a diva, but because I really needed that. I didn't want to take that job unless I had a driver. He didn't have a driver at that point, but he did. When I talked to Estée Lauder about, or the company talked to me about becoming vice chairman because I was promoted from general counsel to vice chairman, there were certain things that the company wanted me to do. I wanted to do women's leadership work, and so I negotiated that as part of what would be my portfolio as vice chairman. I would not have done that earlier in my career, but I did as I went on, and understand that it's important, I think, recognizing your value. Again, not being a diva, but recognizing your value and recognizing what's important to you and what you need to make your life work. And yeah, 4 o'clock in the morning, 4 to 7 is like my prime time. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah. And now it's not 4, it's maybe 5, 6, or 7. Yeah.
Okay. So this is an opportunity for questions. Don't you worry, because I have more questions I could ask, but I'm going to interrupt my flow with an opportunity for people in the room to ask some questions. I mean, Sara or I can answer questions for you if there are any. I mean, anything. Okay, seeing no hands, I'll move on. Okay. I'm going to take from the back of the room first.
Oh, I was pointing at her, but I'll be glad to ask. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, great.
My name's Elizabeth Hadley. I'm a shareholder at Greenberg Traurig here in Austin. I've been a lawyer for 25 years now, so I know there's probably some young lawyers or law students in the room, but I think, we're always still learning things, and I appreciate all the things that you all have said. One question I have is, both as having worked in a firm and then also having, been general counsel, led these companies, what do you recommend in terms of business development and how women particularly develop business? As I find in, working in our firm, it's just different than men sometimes. And I think it's harder for us all the time to ask, for the business. So what are things that you think are effective that women lawyers can do in that space?
I'll repeat the question. That's a great question. And the question was, how can women develop business? And it's harder for women to develop business as in law firms, whether you're an associate or a partner. And how can, what are the most important factors in business development, particularly for women? I have a lot of thoughts on that. First of all, I think develop an expertise. So when I came back from the U.S. Attorney's Office, I had tried a number of big cases, and I had an expertise. So even if the partners didn't necessarily want to bring me in, or a client didn't want a woman lawyer, and there were many of those actually, I had expertise that they needed, and so that was important. I always tell lawyers at firms, develop relationships doesn't have to be with the general counsel, but develop relationships with lawyers inside a company who are, at the next level or one or two levels down, and support them, give them ideas. I could for many years now call a lawyer who would answer my questions, but a lawyer who would help me and say, again, this goes back to listening, a lawyer who would say, I've been following your business, and these are some issues that I know you have or you will have, and here's what's happening. Because as an in-house counsel, you don't keep up in the same way as you do at a firm, and make the in-house lawyers look good. I think that's really important. So developing those relationships and supporting them, not just the general counsel, but a lower level, I think is really, really important. Listening, I think all those things are important. And women should be helping other women. I didn't hire outside counsel because a person was a woman, but I wanted to give that opportunity. And so I think being part of some of these networks is important. Speaking on panels, making yourself known and your expertise is really important, but building those relationships. Do you have ideas?
Yes.
Thoughts?
I've never served as general counsel, as is patently apparent, but I have a lot of experience in terms of asking for things. And often fundraising. I learned at the foot of my husband, who's a par excellence fundraiser for UT and others. But one thing you can do is not only to develop an expertise, but develop confidence and project a positivity which inspires confidence in you from those you're talking with. And it's not just asking for the business. It's okay to tell a story that has a seed of your success in it. You don't have to blab it and like, oh, I won, something as the opener. But you can work into conversations an achievement and what you learned from it, or parlay it, pivot from some comment that the listener makes. And
Yeah.
networking is important, but you got to bring something to the table. You
Yeah.
can't just ask for business. I'm leaning to one side for the audience at home because this camera is between me and the questioner. The point is, an example is, I was appointed to chair the Higher Education Coordinating Board by Ann Richards. I'd helped, and my husband and I had raised a lot of money. I mean, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. And frankly, my market was raising money from women, because women were the untapped resource, and women were not at the table. And it became clear from some mentors of mine Macy Reesner, Connie Calloway, Melinda Perrin, all of whom were married to distinguished alum of the University of Texas. The women corralled me and 2 other women about my vintage back in 1980s and said, you need to raise money for women and help get women to the table. It was fascinating. Now, one of those women was a professional lawyer or any of that, but they knew the issue. And among the next generation, that's me and my several friends, all of whom were lawyers, we realized, whoa, holy mackerel, that is right. And they said, you just need to gut it up. If you believe in the cause or you believe in the mission, whether it's a lawsuit or a policy, if you believe in it, own it and sell it. And don't take it personally when there is a rejection. It's infectious. And one of the things you can do is ask for money because of the greater good. Again, interest. Figure out the person you're talking to and what their interest is. And then ask in a way that serves their interest, which does show research, processing, critical thinking, that you're hitting them the right way. And if the answer is no, so what? You've had a fun conversation. Take it with the glass half full business. And I need to say, I never dreamt when I moved from New York City to Houston, Texas for a 6-month test that A, I would love it in Texas and in Houston in particular, and B, that I would be out there fundraising, that I would chair a board in the state of Texas, that I would be on the federal bench. Never, ever. I didn't have a plan, didn't know anything. I just was one little step to the next. But back to Ann Richards, she says to me, you need to take a board position. And I said, I'm hanging on by my fingernails. I'm working at this law firm. I'm recruiting, I'm jazz speaking. And I said, fingernails. And she said, every man who has raised $1,000 for me wants a board position. They have all thrown their resumes, lobbied me, et cetera. You have done extraordinarily well for me, Anne. And I'm telling you, you're getting a board position, so you just figure out which one you want. And long story short, I was conflicted out of a bunch of the ones I thought I wanted. So I wound up figuring out, oh, higher ed, this works. Then Ann says to me, you're going to be board chair. I said, I didn't go to college in Texas. I have no idea. Except for UT, I haven't set foot on a college campus. I said, I know nothing. She says, that's great. You won't be biased in any school's favor. But here's the next thing. And I mean, I wasn't a judge yet. Let's be clear. I was mediating and had 2 kids and just hanging on by my fingernails, practicing law. I said, okay, I know nothing. So I decided truth was the best policy, and I told the executive director, we're going to set up meetings with the presidents of every school in the state of Texas over which coordinating board has jurisdiction, which means every higher ed institution. And I'm going to go in there and confess ignorance and ask them what they care about. And it worked. It worked. Now, I mean, I was the board chair. So, I mean, I didn't just come in as an associate and say, I know nothing. that would be inappropriate. But I have to tell you, the relationships that the board and I made with these schools by confessing ignorance and letting them teach and feeling strong about teaching and us truly gaining understanding of each segment, from community colleges to technical schools to MD Anderson to obviously the degree granting, higher degree grants. It was amazing. So just think about what other people want. People felt valued, and that is really why I got the judgeship, because I had all these people on all sides of the aisle. All right, another question.
Can I just add to that? But just going back, I want to underscore something that harkens back to what we said before. Understand a business. If you're going out for business development, understand the business, because again, when I'm general counsel, everybody's come pitching things to me. They're not saying, I understand your business. One time, a well-known lawyer did that and came in and said, well, you know, we can do this, we can do that, but, you know, I've been thinking about your business and you need this, or you should think about this. I was completely blown away. So that's really important as well.
Okay,
Add
we
some
have time.
value.
We have time for one more question.
Online question about ad litem appointments, Judge Atlas, if they are still available. And so I don't know if you want to,
Ad litem?
yes.
I'm stumped. The federal courts don't really do that. It's rare. I have appointed them in a case where there's a minor, and frankly, it's hard to find good ad litems because there's no central database. So if I could give one piece of information, the ad litem bar, you should set up a central database where you can promote yourself, and courts could go look. I did it like 3 times in 27 years, so I'm not. Okay, any others? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Diane Darling, and I've spoken on networking for years at the center here. You've talked about networking, you've talked about business. When I worked at, because when I go in to work with general counsel offices, one of the things that they say is, how can the GC's office be not known as the team of no? And internally, so that, you know, when there's challenges, people are the North Star. They are the point of that. And how do you network internally? Can you talk about that so that when something doesn't blow up, then it's a bigger problem?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm laughing because Leonard Lauder used to call the legal department the sales prevention unit. And he said we would prevent the sales because, or, you know, the product would be coming out at the last minute. The lawyers would say, you can't do that, or you can't say that. So I wanted to change that dynamic dramatically. And what I did, and actually both my positions, but certainly at Estée Lauder, is I embedded the lawyers in the business in a profound way. So we're organized by brands, regions, and functions. Estée Lauder has 32 brands. You know, some of them: MAC, Estée Lauder, Jo Malone, Tom Ford, et cetera, Aveda, La Mer. These are all different brands within the umbrella of Estée Lauder. So I set up a dedicated lawyer structure where lawyers had their area of expertise, but they were also part of the senior business team of those brands or a region. They all reported to me because the fiduciary duty is still to the company, but they lived with their brands, or in a perfect world, kind of part-time with the brands, part-time in the legal department, even physically. So they got to understand the issues, they really understood the business, and they were able to be seen as part of the team and not just the Dr. No. It was, I think, a structure that is still going on today and really made a lot of sense. I don't think the legal team or members of the legal department should report to the business management because of the fiduciary duty obligation, but they were embedded in those teams. And it was, again, I come back to fun. It was much more fun for them, and the relationships with the business broadened and deepened. And so they were able to advise on an ongoing basis and not at the last minute.
Don't you think that being embedded, or at least being a lawyer who is understanding the interests of the business person, would be able to come up with a compromise or a solution that wasn't categorically no, it was some
It's more
workaround?
creative, exactly. It's exactly creative. Well, we can't do it this way, but we could do it this way. And can I give you one example of that?
Veronica may.
Okay.
Okay, good.
All right. A perfect example of this is Tom Ford. So we have the license for Tom Ford Beauty. We now own the company. But Tom Ford came up with a fragrance called Fucking Fabulous. And Tom was insisted on this name. And he's an incredible man, very creative. This was the name of the fragrance, Fucking Fabulous. So the lawyer on my team said, oh my God, what are we going to do? He figured out a way to use that name where we could, and in some places we actually could use that name. In some places we had to use star, 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 fabulous. But people got the idea. And in some department stores, we had to put it in an alcove, and in some, so that children wouldn't see it, and some, we could have it right out there. It was so creative and an incredibly successful launch and fragrance that when Tom Ford got a big award at Lincoln Center, the International Fragrance Award, he thanked the Estée Lauder legal team for fucking fabulous. So it kind of doesn't get better than that, but that's how we roll. Yeah.
Well, I want to thank both Sara Moss and Judge Atlas. That was fabulous. Thank you so much for joining, and thank you all for joining us here in person today, and thanks to all of you online. As I mentioned, the event has been approved for 1 hour of CLE ethics credit. If you're joining us via Zoom, you'll get an email with how to claim that credit later this week. If you're joining by phone, please email us so we can make sure that you get that information. I hope all of you will join the Center for our future events and programs. Please follow us on our website and on social media for more information. And I hope you will consider supporting the center and helping us fulfill our mission. Thank you all so much today, and thank you so much.
Thank
to our
you.
guests.
Thank you.